Intro music fades in and out. Visual, grainy footage of 1990s Houston suburban streets. A vibrant family photo of the Millers at a 4th of July picnic, smiles wide. Narrator, Houston, Texas. Summer of 1992. A vast, sprawling metropolis simmering under a relentless sun. A city built on the promises of oil, innovation, and an unwavering southern spirit. For countless families nestled within its ever-expanding suburbs, life was a tapestry woven with routines, simple pleasures, and the comforting predictability of everyday existence. Thomas Miller, known universally as Tom, embodied this spirit. At 42, he was a man firmly rooted in his family and his community. A devoted husband to Sarah, his high school sweetheart, and a loving, engaged father to their two children, 9-year-old Michael and 7-year-old Emily, Tom was, quite simply, the steadfast center of their universe. Visual, Tom in his workshop tinkering, playing catch with Michael, reading a story to Emily. Sarah watching him with affection during a family dinner. Narrator, Tom's days were a rhythm of purposeful work and cherished home life. As a foreman at the sprawling Gulf Coast pipe fabrication plant in the East End, he managed a team of 15, overseeing the intricate welding and assembly of pipelines for the booming energy sector. It was a physically demanding job, often under the oppressive Texas heat, but Tom approached it with a quiet pride and an unmatched work ethic. He drove a sturdy, though visibly aged, 1989 dark blue Ford Tempo LX, its odometer steadily climbing, a testament to his daily 40-minute commute along the bustling Aminas 10 corridor. At home on Sycamore Street in Spring Branch, his presence was a warm anchor. He'd spend evenings in his garage, meticulously restoring old furniture, the scent of sawdust and varnish often mingling with Sarah's cooking. Weekends were reserved for family, trips to Herman Park Zoo, coaching Michael's little leg team, or teaching Emily the names of constellations during quiet nights in their backyard. His laughter was a common, joyous sound, deep and infectious, the kind that promised safety and unconditional love. He was a man who found profound contentment in the ordinary, in the simple joy of a cold Lone Star beer after a long day, the muffled crackle of the Astros game on the radio, and the profound satisfaction of watching his children flourish. Visual, close-up on a stack of bills, a past due notice. Tom and Sarah having a hushed conversation late at night. Tom looking at a newspaper's jobs section with a worried frown. Narrator. Yet even in the most seemingly idyllic lives, subtle fissures could emerge. The national economy in the summer of '92, while not in outright crisis, felt a tremor of uncertainty, and Houston, so tied to the volatile oil and gas industry, was particularly sensitive. Tom's plant, a cornerstone of the community, had recently lost a substantial contract to a competitor, leading to hushed, nervous whispers among the workforce about potential layoffs. Sarah, perceptive and intimately attuned to her husband, began to notice a shift, a faint but persistent shadow in Tom's usually bright demeanor. He'd retreat into himself more often, staying up late in the kitchen, the glow of the overhead light illuminating the lines on his brow as he pored over utility bills, medical statements, and the pages of the Houston Chronicle. The classified section, particularly the small print under industrial jobs, would be meticulously circled with a red pen. When Sarah would gently inquire, her voice laced with concern, he'd offer a reassuring, if slightly strained, smile. "Just keeping an eye on things, honey. Gotta be prepared, nothing to worry about." But the unspoken anxieties, the fear of not being able to provide, of losing the stability they'd so carefully built, hung in the humid air between them, a faint, disquieting hum beneath the surface of their happy domesticity. Visual, morning scene on July 23, 1992. Tom getting ready, kissing Sarah, ruffling Michael's hair, giving Emily a piggyback ride to the kitchen. He grabs his lunchbox, his worn briefcase. He gets into his Ford Tempo, waves, and drives off down the leafy suburban street. Narrator, July 23, 1992, dawned like countless Houston mornings, already thick with the promise of oppressive humidity by 6 a.m., the air heavy and still, yet tinged with the scent of dew-kissed jasmine from Sarah's garden. Tom Miller, a creature of habit, rose before the sun, his internal clock set to the relentless demands of his foreman duties. His routine was sacrosanct, the first strong cup of coffee brewed by Sarah, a quick but invigorating shower, a kiss on Sarah's forehead as she stirred lazily in bed. He woke Michael and Emily with playful nudges and soft jokes about their upcoming breakfast, promising them a long-anticipated trip to the Astrodome for an Astros game later that summer, a promise that now felt heavy with an unforeseen irony. He grabbed his lunchbox, packed with Sarah's meticulously prepared sandwich and an apple, and his worn briefcase filled with schematics and production schedules. He left the house at precisely 6:45 a.m., a familiar, easy wave as he pulled his dark blue Ford Tempo out of the driveway, the gravel crunching softly under its tires. He merged onto the sleepy Sycamore Street, the morning sun just beginning to burn through the haze. "See you tonight, love," he'd called to Sarah, his voice carrying clearly across the dew-soaked lawn. Those would be the last words she would ever hear from him, their tender echo destined to haunt her waking hours and infuse her dreams with a chilling premonition of loss. Visual. Sarah looking at the clock, then out the window, a subtle flicker of worry, then increasingly frantic phone calls, the answering machine blinking, her expression changing from concern to fear to outright panic. Narrator. Evening descended, bringing with it not the usual comfort of Tom's return, but a growing, insidious unease. 6:30 p.m., then 7 p.m. Tom was meticulously punctual, his arrival by 6:15 p.m. as reliable as the setting sun. Sarah tried his work number, but the plant closed at 5 p.m., the automated voice on the other end echoing her growing anxiety. She called his best friend, David Henderson, a fellow foreman who often carpooled or shared lunch with Tom. David hadn't seen Tom since yesterday's shift, a casual remark that now felt loaded with unspoken dread. A cold knot began to tighten in Sarah's stomach, a premonition she desperately tried to rationalize away. She called again and again, the telephone receiver becoming a cold, heavy weight in her trembling hand. Each unanswered ring, each sterile dial tone, amplified her rising fear. She tried local hospitals, her voice growing increasingly strained with each polite but utterly unhelpful query from receptionists who knew nothing of a Thomas Miller. By 9 p.m., Michael and Emily were asleep, their innocent dreams untouched by the gathering storm that was about to break over their mother's heart. Sarah, pacing the living room, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the suffocating silence, the telephone receiver now a symbol of her desperate futility, made the call that would irrevocably shatter their world into a million irretrievable pieces. She called the Houston Police Department. Visual, police car lights flashing outside the Miller home, casting stark shadows, two uniformed officers, young and perhaps a little jaded, taking notes. Sarah, distraught, clutching a tissue. Detective Rodriguez's arrival the next day. Narrator, the Houston Police Department, HPD, dispatched two patrolmen, their youthful faces betraying a practiced, if weary, detachment. They took down the initial missing person report with a routine efficiency that felt callous to Sarah. Missing adults, particularly men, were often quickly, almost automatically, dismissed as having simply chosen to walk away from their lives. "He'll probably turn up in a day or two, ma'am, once he's had his space," one officer offered, his tone dripping with a dismissive indifference that sliced through Sarah's already frayed nerves. But Sarah knew Tom. She knew the depth of his devotion to his family. He would never, ever leave them, not without a single, solitary word, not without a fight if a fight was what it took. Visual. Detective Roberto Rodriguez, mid-40s, a quiet intensity in his eyes. He's looking at a family photo of the Millers. He interviews Sarah, then David Henderson. A map of Houston on a corkboard, pins being placed. Narrator. The following morning, Detective Roberto Rodriguez, a seasoned HPD investigator with nearly 2 decades on the force, was assigned the case. Rodriguez was a man of methodical patience, his dark eyes missing nothing, his demeanor one of quiet, empathetic resolve. He interviewed Sarah again, painstakingly, gently probing for any recent arguments, any hidden secrets, any subtle shifts in Tom's behavior beyond the obvious financial anxieties. Sarah, despite her raw grief, struggled to provide any concrete answers. Tom had been himself, a good man, a family man. He wasn't the type to gamble or carry on an affair. He had no known enemies. The dark blue Ford Tempo, his utilitarian lifeline to work and family, was also gone. No note, no signs of a struggle within the house, no broken window, no forced entry. Just an empty space in the driveway where Tom Miller should have been, a void that mirrored the one growing in Sarah's chest. Rodriguez then spoke to David Henderson, Tom's friend, who confirmed Tom's meticulous habits and recent worries about the plant's future. David couldn't offer anything substantial either, only a growing sense of bewildered fear. Visual, HPD officers methodically searching the plant, the parking lot, scenes of Tom's route, desolate stretches of highway. Sarah, looking tired but determined, making flyers with Michael and Emily, Emily's small voice asking strangers. Narrator, the initial investigation, though diligent, followed standard HPD protocol, a series of increasingly fruitless checks. Officers canvassed the sprawling pipe fabrication plant, speaking to every shift worker, every supervisor. No one had seen Tom arrive on the 23rd. His time card had not been punched. His work locker, cleaned out a week prior as part of a routine inventory and now empty, held nothing of consequence. They meticulously checked his usual commute route, the local gas stations he frequented, the unassuming diners where he occasionally grabbed a cup of coffee. Nothing, no eyewitnesses reported seeing the dark blue Tempo after it pulled away from Sycamore Street. The sheer, overwhelming vastness of Houston, its labyrinthine network of streets and highways, seemed to have swallowed him whole without a trace. Sarah, refusing to be rendered helpless by grief, mobilized with a fierce determination. She printed hundreds of flyers bearing Tom's smiling face, a snapshot from that joyous 4th of July picnic, plastering them on lamp posts, community bulletin boards, and store windows across Spring Branch and the East End. Michael and Emily, confused and profoundly frightened, helped their mother, their small hands carefully taping the edges of the posters. "Have you seen my daddy?" Emily would ask strangers, her voice small and tremulous, laced with a heartbreaking hope, only to be met with sympathetic but utterly empty gazes. Visual news report snippet about the missing father, fading to a montage of phone calls, each answered by Sarah with renewed, then crushed, hope. A bank statement showing no activity, Tom's empty side of the bed. Narrator, the local news channels, hungry for human interest stories, picked up the story, a brief but poignant segment during the evening broadcast. Appeals were made, the HPD hotline number flashed across screens. A flurry of calls ensued, well-meaning but ultimately false sightings, anonymous tips that led down winding, unproductive paths, and even a few cruel, thoughtless pranks. Each call was a fresh jolt of adrenaline for Sarah, a fleeting spark of hope that would inevitably be extinguished, replaced by a crushing wave of disappointment. The detectives meticulously checked Tom's bank accounts. No unusual withdrawals, his credit cards, absolutely no activity since his disappearance. It was as if he had simply dematerialized, his life, his very existence, surgically excised from the digital and paper trails that usually define our modern lives. The more they searched, the more complete the void became, a chilling testament to the efficiency of his vanishing. Visual, months passing, represented by calendar pages turning, seasons changing. Sarah looking increasingly haggard, dark circles under her eyes, Michael becoming more withdrawn, Emily clinging to her mother. The house feels emptier, quieter. Narrator, weeks bled into months, an agonizing, timeless continuum of uncertainty. The initial surge of community support, so vital in the immediate aftermath, began its inevitable, painful ebb. Neighbors still offered polite platitudes and sympathetic glances, but the phone calls grew less frequent. The comforting casseroles from church friends stopped arriving. The questions, however, never ceased, evolving into insidious whispers and speculative theories. Had he run off with another woman, shedding his old life like an unwanted skin? Was he secretly embroiled in debt, a hidden world of shady dealings or dangerous people? Sarah, though outwardly stoic, heard the whispers, felt the subtle shifts in social interactions, the judgment in averted gazes. It was a secondary trauma, a slow, corrosive poisoning of her reputation and, more agonizingly, of Tom's memory. Detective Rodriguez, despite the relentless pressure of a growing caseload, kept Tom's file open on his desk, a persistent, nagging question mark in his mind, a testament to his own frustration. He pursued every lead, no matter how tenuous, a vagrant claiming to have seen a man fitting Tom's description hitchhiking near Galveston, a convenience store clerk reporting a similar dark blue Ford Tempo parked suspiciously in a remote lot. Each lead, however, led only to another dead end, another cul-de-sac of hope, leaving Rodriguez to return to the blank spaces in Tom's last day. Visual, Michael, now a preteen, trying to comfort a tearful Emily. Sarah crying silently into a pillow in her bedroom. The house, once vibrant, now feels heavy with unspoken grief and a profound, echoing silence. Narrator, for Michael and Emily, the crushing, inexplicable absence of their father became a permanent, gaping wound, a void that shaped their childhoods. Michael, now 10, tried to project an air of stoic strength for his little sister, but the fear, the crushing uncertainty, was a constant, suffocating companion. He began to internalize his emotions, a quiet fury brewing beneath his adolescent exterior. Emily, once so ebullient and full of joy, became withdrawn, her innocent questions about Daddy's return growing more plaintive, more desperate, morphing into a quiet, resigned sadness. Sarah, now juggling her demanding work at a local pharmacy with the overwhelming, solitary burden of single parenthood and the gnawing uncertainty of her husband's fate, struggled fiercely to keep the family afloat, both financially and emotionally. Every anniversary, every birthday, every holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Father's Day, was a stark, brutal reminder of the void Tom had left, an empty chair at the dinner table that seemed to scream his absence. The house, once filled with the resonant echoes of Tom's laughter, now often rang with a profound, suffocating silence. The years crawled by, marked by the relentless changing of seasons and the inexorable passage of time, but no change came to the Miller family's torment. The hope, once a fierce blaze, dwindled to a fragile ember, flickering against the cold winds of reality. Visual montage of early 2000s tech clunky flip phones, the screech of dial-up modems, dot matrix printers. Scenes of life moving on for others, but the Miller house remaining a bastion of silent waiting. Michael graduating high school, Emily at a school dance, a bittersweet image. Narrator. By 2001, 9 agonizing years had passed since Thomas Miller simply vanished into the humid Houston air. Michael was now 18, a thoughtful, somewhat introverted young man preparing to embark on his college journey, his father's ghost a silent companion. Emily was 16, navigating the tumultuous waters of high school, her once bright eyes now holding a lingering shadow of sorrow. Sarah, though visibly aged by the relentless strain, had managed to forge a new life, a fragile, hard-won stability, but the phantom limb of her missing husband ached constantly, a perpetual ache beneath the surface of her daily existence. The police file on Tom Miller was officially cold, relegated to a dusty shelf in the HPD archives, another unsolved mystery in a city teeming with them. Detective Rodriguez, having ascended the ranks to lieutenant, his hair grayer, his patience thinner, but his commitment to justice undimmed, still occasionally pulled out Tom's file, the haunting image of his earnest face etched onto the old case documents. The public, if they remembered Tom Miller at all, thought of him as another statistic, another man who simply disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the anonymity of urban life. Visual. A remote, densely forested dirt road in the Sam Houston National Forest, late autumn. A hunter, clad in camouflage, cautiously making his way through the undergrowth, then stopping abruptly, wide-eyed. He points. Cut to a wide shot of a severely rusted, dilapidated car, almost consumed by vegetation. Narrator, then on a crisp, unusually cool October afternoon in 2001, 9 years, 2 months, and 4 days after Tom Miller drove away from his home, the agonizing silence was abruptly, violently shattered. A seasoned local hunter, a man named Jesse Thorne, tracking a particularly elusive 10-point buck deep within the vast, ancient confines of the Sam Houston National Forest, stumbled upon a sight that sent a primal chill down his spine. Miles from any paved road, obscured by dense undergrowth, years of accumulated pine needles, and a thick blanket of fallen leaves, sat a vehicle. It was a dark blue Ford Tempo LX. Its tires were long flat, the wheel wells consumed by rust. Its windows were shattered, the interior ravaged by time, moisture, and perhaps by scavengers, animal or human. The paint had faded to a dull, mottled gray-blue, almost merging with the muted colors of the forest floor. Jesse, a man accustomed to the solitude and stark realities of the wilderness, felt a profound disquiet. The car's age, its complete degradation, spoke of a long, undisturbed slumber. He cautiously approached, his hunter's instincts on high alert. Then, with a growing sense of dread, he reported his discovery to the local authorities, the Walker County Sheriff's Office, a sleepy rural outpost accustomed to minor skirmishes, not cold cases from a major metropolis. Visual crime scene investigators in white suits meticulously documenting the car. Close up on the heavily corroded VIN plate, then a computer screen with the search results flashing. Thomas Miller, missing person, HPD 1992. Narrator. The sheriff's deputies, along with a forensics team hastily assembled from various small-town agencies and augmented by a state crime lab technician, secured the scene, establishing a wide perimeter. The vehicle was carefully processed, every detail documented, photographed, and cataloged. Miraculously, despite the extensive corrosion and overgrowth, the vehicle's VIN, partially obscured but still readable on the dashboard, was carefully extracted. It was run through the national database, a routine check that would, in this instance, prove anything but routine. The results came back within hours, electrifying the small sheriff's office and sending shockwaves rippling through the Houston Police Department. The car belonged to Thomas Miller. The dark blue 1989 Ford Tempo LX, last seen pulling out of a driveway on Sycamore Street on July 23, 1992, had finally been found. Its rediscovery was a silent scream, echoing 9 years of unanswered questions. Visual, Lieutenant Rodriguez, now with more gray hair, receiving the phone call. His expression shifts from weary resignation to a flicker of renewed, almost painful, determination. Sarah reacting to the news, a mix of shock, terror, and a desperate, fragile hope. Michael and Emily, now young adults, comforting her, their own faces a mask of complex emotions. Narrator. Lieutenant Rodriguez, already engrossed in a different, more contemporary investigation, received the unexpected call. The name Thomas Miller hit him like a physical blow, resurrecting a cold case he had long considered a permanent stain on his career. A profound mixture of dread and grim determination settled over him. The news hit Sarah like a second, equally devastating physical blow. 9 years of coping, of carefully constructing a fragile piece built on the shifting sands of uncertainty, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a fresh, sickening wave of terror and a terrifying, unwelcome resurgence of hope. Michael, now 18 and old enough to comprehend the brutal, often ambiguous realities of such discoveries, felt a surge of adrenaline intertwined with a deep, unsettling dread. Emily, at 16, her youthful optimism still occasionally surfacing, clung to the possibility of a definitive answer, any answer, no matter how painful. The discovery had reignited a fire they thought had long been extinguished, but the flames brought both light and unbearable heat. Visual forensics team meticulously examining the car's interior under portable lights. Close up on the faded gas receipt, then the crude map. Rodriguez and other detectives studying enlarged photos of these items. Narrator. The combined forensics team, now augmented by HPD personnel, spent days meticulously processing the abandoned vehicle, a painstaking effort against the ravages of nearly a decade. The car's interior was a desolate wasteland of mold, rust, and animal detritus, but amidst the decay, they managed to salvage a few items of profound, albeit cryptic, interest. Tucked beneath the passenger seat, remarkably preserved by the relative dryness of its hiding place, was a faded gas receipt from a small, independent station near Huntsville, dated July 22, 1992, the day before Tom vanished. This was highly unusual. Tom rarely traveled north of Houston, and certainly not that far, nearly 50 miles, simply for gas. Even more unsettling was a small, crudely drawn map, almost illegible, hastily sketched on a crumpled piece of paper and found tucked deep into the glove compartment. It depicted a winding, unpaved dirt road leading off a highway, marked with a bold, emphatic X. It was definitively not a map of a known hiking trail, a local picnic spot, or any family destination. It looked like a route to somewhere specific, somewhere clandestine, perhaps even dangerous. But it was only a fragment, a tantalizing piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle with no discernible borders, no surrounding context. Crucially, despite the extensive search of the vehicle and the surrounding area, no human remains were found, only undeniable signs that the car had been there, undisturbed for a very, very long time. Visual. Lieutenant Rodriguez, looking weary but resolute, reviewing maps and satellite images appropriate for 2001, perhaps early Google Earth-type images. He's in a room with younger detectives, explaining the challenges. Sarah and her children in a police interview room, providing new, detailed statements, their voices strained. Narrator. The reopened investigation, now dubbed Operation Sycamore, was fraught with an almost insurmountable array of difficulties. 9 years of relentless Texas weather, the unforgiving processes of decay, and the relentless march of time had obliterated most potential forensic evidence. The small, faded gas receipt offered a new geographical lead, but the independent gas station was long gone, replaced by a gleaming, generic chain convenience store. The original employees were untraceable, their memories faded. The crudely drawn map, while tantalizingly specific in its depiction of a dirt road, remained too vague in its overall context to be immediately actionable. Rodriguez, now leading a new team of younger detectives who hadn't lived through the soul-crushing dead ends of the initial cold case, tried to meticulously piece together Tom's last known movements. Did Tom drive himself to that remote, desolate spot? Was he forced, perhaps at gunpoint? Why was the car abandoned there, nearly 50 miles from his home, in a direction he never normally took, away from his usual routines and responsibilities? The questions multiplied, each one heavier than the last. Visual, flashbacks to snippets of Tom's life, his laughter, his worries about money, juxtaposed with the harsh reality of the found, degraded car. Sarah's face showing the profound emotional toll. Michael and Emily, now adults, struggling with the renewed media frenzy. Narrator, the Miller family was once again put through an emotional ringer, a cruel repetition of their darkest nightmare. Sarah recounted everything she could, every mundane detail of their life, every anxious thought Tom had ever voiced, every desperate search she had undertaken. Michael and Emily, now adults, forced to relive the profound trauma of their childhoods, provided what little fragments they remembered, their voices strained with a mixture of hope and deep-seated pain. The financial strain on Tom, the whispers of layoffs at the plant, once dismissed as minor anxieties, now became central to the police's new theories. Was Tom, a man so dedicated to his family, involved in something illicit to supplement his income, something that spiraled tragically out of his control? Had he fallen prey to a bad deal, a desperate scheme lured by the promise of quick money in a volatile economy? It seemed so utterly unlike the Tom Miller they knew, the man of unwavering integrity, but desperation, the detectives posited, could twist even the most upright man into unfamiliar shapes. The police, while undeniably sympathetic to the family's plight, had a duty to consider every single angle, even the most painful and disquieting ones. Visual, news cameras and reporters swarming outside the Miller home again, microphones thrust forward. Sarah, looking older, shielding her now adult children from the intrusive questions. The public's renewed fascination, now tinged with sensationalism. Narrator, the media circus, dormant for almost a decade, erupted anew with a voracious hunger. The Miller family was once again thrust into the harsh, unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. The new developments, instead of bringing solace or clarity, brought only a fresh torrent of speculation, half-truths, and increasingly intrusive questions. Some local tabloid-style reports suggested Tom had run off with someone and met foul play later, a more dramatic, less emotionally taxing narrative for the public. Others revived and embellished the theory of financial impropriety gone fatally wrong. Each new theory, each rehashed rumor, each speculative headline chipped away relentlessly at the family's already fragile peace, leaving them feeling exposed, vulnerable, and once again, devastatingly alone. Their private anguish became public spectacle. Visual, Lieutenant Rodriguez and a forensics technician in a brightly lit lab, staring at a computer screen showing data from the old investigation, now digitized and cross-referenced with 2001-era technology. Frustration growing on Rodriguez's face. Narrator, the HPD brought in cold case specialists, utilizing the nascent digital forensics techniques available in 2001 to review the original files, hoping to unearth overlooked connections or discrepancies. They re-examined phone records, cross-referenced names against nascent databases, but the relentless passage of time proved an almost insurmountable barrier. People had moved, their phone numbers disconnected. Memories had faded into hazy recollections, or vanished entirely. Crucial evidence from 1992 had long since degraded, or was simply no longer obtainable. The initial lack of a robust, immediate investigation, due in part to the prevailing assumptions about missing adults in 1992, had undeniably hampered their efforts now, creating a chasm of lost time and lost opportunities. Key witnesses from the plant had retired, passed away, or simply couldn't be located. The trail was not just cold, it was frozen solid, almost perfectly preserved in its infuriating lack of clues. Visual. Rodriguez, alone in his office, looking at the faded, crumpled map fragment, tracing the X with his finger. The vast, silent forest, then a quick cut to the unassuming suburban street of the Miller home, unchanged, yet forever altered. Narrator Rodriguez, driven by a profound personal commitment to the Miller family and the gnawing injustice of the case, became fixated on the fragment of the map. He meticulously drove the rural roads around Huntsville and the Sam Houston National Forest, searching for any dirt track, any remote clearing, any hidden logging path that might match the crude drawing. He found several, but none, despite exhaustive searching, yielded any further clues. The X on the map could mean anything: a clandestine meeting point, a drop-off location, a spot where a second vehicle might have been parked, or even something far more sinister, a grave, a place of no return. But without context, without any accompanying information, it remained a meaningless scribble, a ghostly whisper from a tragic past, echoing silently in the vastness of the Texas wilderness. The new leads, though initially promising, slowly, inevitably fizzled out, swallowed by the sheer expanse of time and the unforgiving anonymity of the land. Visual, Sarah holding an old, slightly blurred photo of Tom, tears finally falling. Michael and Emily, now truly adults, embracing their mother, their own faces etched with a quiet, enduring sorrow. The Miller home, still standing, but forever changed by the shadow of absence. Narrator. The finding of Tom's car, intended to provide answers, had instead deepened and complicated the mystery, twisting the knife of uncertainty in the Miller family's hearts. It unequivocally confirmed he hadn't simply walked away from his life, at least not intentionally, or his car would not have been abandoned in such a remote, desolate place, a silent sentinel to an unknown tragedy. It strongly, powerfully suggested foul play, a violent end, or an abduction, a fate far more terrifying than a simple departure. But without a body, without a perpetrator, without any other substantial, verifiable evidence, the case once again stalled, grinding to a halt with a sickening finality. The fragile hope that had flared so brightly for Sarah and her children was slowly, agonizingly, cruelly extinguished, replaced not by closure, but by a new, heavier, more profound form of grief, the grief of endless, unanswerable questions. The absence of a body meant no proper burial, no final goodbye, no tangible resting place, only an endless loop of what-ifs, agonizing possibilities, and the haunting specter of an unknown truth. Visual. A vast, silent shot of the Sam Houston National Forest, its trees swaying gently, holding its secrets close. Then a return to the suburban Houston home, still there, but subtly changed, aged, a monument to endurance and unresolved pain. Narrator Thomas Miller remained vanished, a phantom presence in the lives of those who loved him most. His car, a stark, rusted monument to a forgotten tragedy, sat in an HPD impound lot for years, its metal shell slowly succumbing to the elements before eventually being salvaged and scrapped, a relic of a life cut short, a mystery unsolved. Sarah Miller and her children continued their lives, forever marked by the gaping hole in their family, by the profound and permanent scar of his absence. They learned, slowly and painfully, to live with the unanswered questions, the agonizing uncertainty, the cold comfort that at least Tom hadn't simply abandoned them of his own free will. But the terrible, unvarnished truth of what happened on July 23, 1992, on a humid Houston morning, somewhere between Sycamore Street and a remote, forgotten forest trail, remains hidden, buried beneath the weight of time and the silent, unforgiving earth. The Sam Houston National Forest, a vast, ancient sentinel, kept its secrets, and the city of Houston, ever growing, ever forgetting, moved on, leaving the Miller family to carry the heavy, immutable burden of an unending mystery, a father vanished, and a life forever defined by a question mark. Outro music fades in.